Is the Iran-US ceasefire a complete fluke? Just when the world thought it could breathe a sigh of relief, the newly announced US-Iran ceasefire is already falling apart. The ink was barely dry on the agreement from April 7, 2026, when the whole deal was thrown into chaos. For a moment, it looked like we had averted a catastrophic war. President Trump hailed the deal as a foundation for lasting peace and market rally. But it seems there is trouble in the water. So, what's really going on? We're going to break down the three fatal flaws that prove this truce was claimed to be dead on arrival. We'll look at Israeli attack in Lebanon, the chokehold on the world's oil supply in the Strait of Hormuz, and the deliberate ambiguity at the heart of the deal itself. The first and most immediate sign this ceasefire was a sham didn't come from Washington or Tehran, but from the skies above Lebanon. Just hours after the truce was announced, Israeli Defense Forces unleashed a massive coordinated air assault, striking over 100 Hezbollah sites across the country, including in the heart of Beirut. The death toll from that day alone was quite staggering, with reports claiming over 250 people were killed. To put that in perspective, this single day of ceasefire was one of the deadliest since the war in Lebanon resumed in March. This is where the entire agreement starts to unravel. Iran's 10-point proposal, which Trump himself called a workable basis on which to negotiate, explicitly demanded a halt to fighting on all fronts. For Iran, all fronts absolutely includes the war against its main regional proxy, Hezbollah. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi immediately called the Israeli attack strikes a major violation of the truce. Warning that Iran would walk away if the attack continued, he put the choice starkly to the United States: ceasefire or continue war via Israel. But Washington and Tel Aviv had a completely different interpretation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office quickly stated that Israel's operation against Hezbollah were outside the scope of the US-Iran deal. President Trump confirmed it, flatly telling the media that Lebanon is not included. In a stunning display of diplomatic chaos, US Vice President J.D. Vance even warned Iran it would be dumb to risk the whole negotiation over Israel's action in Lebanon. This isn't some minor disagreement. It's a fundamental split in what the truce even mean. Iran sees its regional allies as the single axis of resistance. An attack on Hezbollah is an attack on them. The US and Israel, however, surgically separated the conflict, creating a loophole so large you could fly a squadron of fighter jets through it. Hezbollah, for its part, responded to the Israeli strikes with its own rocket attacks, declaring the fight would go on until the US-Israel aggression stops. And just like that, the so-called ceasefire, less than 24 hours old, became a rhetorical shield for one of the most intense days of fighting in a war that has already displaced over 1 million people. The second critical failure of this truce lies in the world's most important oil choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Reopening this narrow waterway was a core demand for the United States. Nearly 20 million barrels of oil, about a fifth of global consumption, pass through it every day. It also handles a quarter of the world's seaborne trade. When Iran effectively closed the strait, it sent shockwave through the global economy. The ceasefire was supposed to fix this. President Trump announced that Iran had agreed to the free, safe, and immediate reopening of the strait. And for a few hours, it seems to be working. Marine traffic trackers showed a slight uptick in movement, and a couple of oil tankers were reportedly given safe passage. But that optimism didn't last. In retaliation for the Israeli strikes in Lebanon, Iran immediately reversed course. The Fars news agency reported that all tanker traffic has once again halted. Instead of an open waterway, Iran began enforcing a system of coordinated passage, meaning ships need permission from the Iranian armed forces to get through. This move completely undermined the American side of the deal. But it gets worse. Iran's 10-point proposal included a demand that would let it charge toll on every ship that passes, potentially as high as $2 million per vessel. While the White House claims it hasn't accepted this, President Trump has openly talked about a joint venture with Iran to control the strait. This ambiguity has created a standoff. As of now, despite White House claims of more traffic, the flow of ships remains a fraction of what it was before the war, with shipping companies unwilling to take the risk of getting shot. The economic stakes are huge. A long-term closure or a tolling system controlled by Tehran would drive up the price of oil and shipping, fueling, and global inflation. This creates a nightmare for central banks like the Federal Reserve, which would be stuck between fighting inflation with rate hikes that could cause unemployment, or cutting rates and letting price spiral out of control. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a strip of water, it's a lever on the global economy, and right now Iran is refusing to let go. The ceasefire didn't open the strait, it just changed the nature of the blockade. The third, and maybe the most damning one, is that this ceasefire is a fluke in the agreement itself. It's so full of conflicting interpretation and intentional ambiguity that it feels like it was destined to fail. It's a house of cards built on mutual distrust between the US and Iran party. The first major red flag is that US and Iranian version of the deal don't really match that well. When the ceasefire was announced, the White House claimed Iran had offered a more reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan, suggesting Tehran had folded under the pressure. They even insisted that Iran's original 10-point proposal was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump. Yet, Trump himself later admitted on social media that they would be discussing tariffs and sanctions relief with Iran, a key demand from that very same proposal proposed by Iran. Meanwhile, Iran's Supreme National Security Council celebrated the deal as a huge win, claiming the US had accepted its 10-point plan, which included lifting all sanctions and the withdrawal of all US forces from the region. So, which is it? Did Iran cave or did the US agree to Iran's term? The fact that both sides are claiming victory tells you everything. There was really no real agreement. But the most critical point of this conflict is buried in the fine print on Iran's nuclear program. Analysts have pointed out a major difference between the Farsi and English version of the Iran's proposal. The Farsi version reportedly has clauses allowing for continued uranium enrichment, a red line for the US and Israel, that were conveniently left out of the English translation. This is a classic diplomatic bait and switch. While President Trump has claimed the nuclear issues are taken care of, this conflicting document proves that the most dangerous issue of all is still completely unresolved. This is the messy black backdrop for the upcoming negotiation in Islamabad, Pakistan, which are set to be led by Vice President J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner. They'll be meeting an Iranian delegation led by the hardline parliament speaker Mohammad Baghdad Ghalibaf. They are walking into a negotiation where the two sides can't even agree on what they agreed on just days ago. They don't agree on Lebanon, they don't agree on the Strait of Hormuz, and they certainly don't agree on the nuclear question. This isn't a negotiation, it's more of like a recipe for more war. So, is the US-Iran ceasefire a complete fluke? All the evidence point to a resounding yes. This is a tactical pause, not a strategic peace. It was born out of desperation, giving both sides a temporary off-ramp from a conflict that was escalating way too fast, and probably they needed time to regroup and prepare to attack again. But the cracks were there from the very beginning. The blatant exclusion of the Lebanon front created a parallel war that immediately destroyed the truce credibility. The ongoing standoff in the Strait of Hormuz shows that Iran holds powerful economic leverage and isn't going to give it up without major concessions. And the conflict think deceptive text of the agreement itself reveal a profound lack of trust and common ground, especially in the nuclear issue. The upcoming talks in Islamabad aren't about finalizing a peace deal, not in my opinion. They're about to deciding who gets blamed when it all falls apart. This ceasefire was never about peace, it is about reloading. The core issues driving this conflict are all still in place. The question isn't if the ceasefire will collapse, but when, and what the consequence will be for the world when it does. Due to this being a fact, many traders and investors are understandably worried. We still don't know when this war will end and will oil prices come back down. An oil price increase in a high inflation, low hiring world is not a great sign. It will push inflation but also push many companies to bankruptcy, essentially increasing unemployment. This two-pronged attack is something the Fed is dreading. It can defend against one, but two is just too much. This meant that the Fed is right now between a rock and a hard place. And that increase in uncertainty is also felt by the market that are increasingly moving to the dollar and gold as a safe haven. This in turn makes the stock market with valuation to gold drop below strong support, which can indicate a coming recession as investor confidence is very, very low. What does this affect Bitcoin? Well, if this is a recession, this will be the first time Bitcoin and the crypto market experience one. There is no way of telling which can actually survive, but one thing is for sure. It seems like things may need to go worse before it getting better. What do you think is the biggest threat about this ceasefire? Is it the fighting in Lebanon, the standoff in Strait of Hormuz, or the deception in the deal itself? And what do you think it will be affecting Bitcoin? Let us know in the comments below, and if you like this content, you might want to check out why Bitcoin might be cracked by quantum computer here, or how the protocol in DeFi is hacked through social engineering here. Stay safe guys, stay curious, and I'll see you guys next time.